America, the country of the car. The car is a symbol of freedom and the American way, and we use it for everything from going to school, to work, to grocery shopping, to the iconic family road trip. In America, we just accept that the best way to go from place to place is either by car or bus, or if you're going far, by plane. There are no real other alternatives for transportation. The thing is, though, it doesn't have to be this way. America once relied on its rails for its great westward expansion, and its freight rail network is still considered one of the best in the world. What about passenger rail? Why is it important? Why does it suck? And how can we fix it? Intercity passenger rail is important for two big reasons: to stop climate change and to allow for more freedom of travel. First, increased use of intercity rail is critical to the fight against climate change, as it produces very little in CO2 emissions per passenger, compared to nearly every other form of transportation available. In fact, a trip from New York to DC produces nearly 6 times less CO2 per passenger in a train compared to a car. Not only is reducing dependency on gas better for the environment, but it also helps us be less vulnerable to the up and down swings of the oil market, which we've seen drastically change our living standards. Second, as intercity rails stop at communities on their routes, they can help improve freedom of travel by reducing the cost to go to smaller destinations, lowering the barrier to travel to smaller and farther-flung destinations, while also allowing those in smaller communities better methods of traveling for work and vacation. This also means that more people can live further away from their commuting locations, without needing to make excessively long commutes by car, which is not only safer for everyone, but results in less traffic on the roads and allows people to get more sleep and productive work time while sitting in trains. This also means that people who can't afford to have a car, or would rarely need them, like students or people living in dense cities, can more easily be able to travel home or to travel around. Despite just how important intercity rail is now and in the future, for much of America, access to intercity rail is functionally non-existent. And to explain why, we need to take a look at Amtrak's history. Amtrak was founded in the 70s as major restructuring occurred in the rail industry. As the interstate system was being built, along with the rest of the extensive road network in America, trucks began to form a major competitive threat to freight rail, and more people began to travel by car. The large number of rail companies, which at the time were required to run passenger routes, nearly collapsed from too many companies working with too little demand. In a bid to prevent the collapse of the entire rail industry in the 70s, the federal government took all of the passenger rail routes and trains and merged them together into one large publicly run company known as Amtrak, while also deregulating the freight rail companies, which got to keep much of the remaining rail infrastructure. This saved the rail industry, and through a series of mergers, the freight rail companies managed to get back into profitability. They chose to minimize their operating costs, even as cargo loads increased more and more through a globalizing economy, by cutting maintenance, removing rail lines, and increasing the length of their trains, all to increase their operating ratio, which is the percent of revenue spent on operating costs. This was an approach that appealed to investors, but resulted in them not working to expand to handle additional demand on their rail lines. While this was all helpful for rail companies, it hampered Amtrak's ability to run its routes effectively and achieve its desired profitability, as it became infamous for its extremely poor on-time performance, as freight companies refused to give Amtrak trains priority over the rails, despite that being legally guaranteed. On top of this, rail companies would put slow orders on under-maintained tracks, forcing Amtrak trains to proceed at a crawl instead of properly maintaining them to fulfill their obligations to help Amtrak maintain smooth operations. All of these reasons have ensured that Amtrak is not a reliable method of transportation outside the Northeast Corridor, where they own all of the tracks and therefore do not deal with any of the same issues. This makes Amtrak a very poor proposition in comparison to just driving or finding a bus, and drives down demand drastically for using Amtrak. Therefore, the simple and cost-effective solution is to add a couple of regulations on freight rail operations that ensure that they have to build and maintain infrastructure that is large enough to actually account for the demand on rails and the length of their trains, while requiring freight rail companies to ensure that Amtrak has the ability to run at full speeds on well-maintained tracks with their legal priority on the rails. With all this in place, Amtrak would no longer be hampered by extreme delays across its network, allowing people to be able to trust the system and increasing demand for intercity rail, which can allow for this: Amtrak's 15-year expansion plan. This plan includes 39 new routes and improvements for 25 routes across the country, and Amtrak has found that demand already exists for all of these routes. Thus, with consumer trust, Amtrak could begin taking steps forward in expanding their operations with available demand for the service and even potentially reaching profitability, providing more and more of the country with access to intercity passenger rail.